Ankara, Kente, Kanga, or Shama are some of the most colorful, well-known African fabrics that are popular across much of the continent. While these hand-woven textiles are treasured for their high cultural values, cheaper Chinese-made fashion products are increasingly penetrating the African market. Hello and welcome to Our Voices. I am Semenyi Shekoye and I'm joined by my co-hosts Orian Itangishaka and Ginny Niwa. Today we are talking about the impact of Chinese fabrics on Africa's traditional textile industry. Hello, ladies.
Hello,
Hey.
hello. Look
You
beautiful.
look beautiful. I was going to say that. You both look so beautiful. But I have a question. Do you know if your dresses are authentic, locally hand-woven fabrics or Chinese-made?
I know mine is made in New York or something.
I mean, it's African. Look, we have African designers, African prints, but I don't know if it's made in Africa because a lot of times, like she said, some of these are printed in Europe.
Yeah.
Some of them are printed in China, but, I don't know.
This is the typical of.
But does it matter?
I feel it matter. Like I can understand, sometimes you're on a budget. And this type of thing is not traditionally gives you like an African vibe, but at the same time, I do like quality and I do like authenticity. So if I have a choice and if I feel like, okay, I want to spend, because, sometimes you have variety of, clothing. And, if I see something like, wow, it's, because
You
you
would
can
definitely
tell,
prefer the
yes, I don't
authenticity.
mind.
I definitely
sometimes.
love the authenticity, especially the stories behind the authenticity of African attires. When you know exactly what they go through to do them and the meanings behind them, I definitely would prefer authenticity, more even sometimes than the prices, So I would look at the authenticity.
Yeah, because sometimes it's not just about tradition or style, it's also about the pride that comes with the dresses, that comes with how they are made, right?
Correct.
So for centuries, Africa has produced handmade, traditional and colorful fabric designs with elaborate prints, bold patterns and symbols. These fabrics created from cotton, wool, silk or animal skins convey spiritual and cultural gatherings, community celebrations and speak to the history of communities. However, cheap Chinese-made African clothing is pushing domestic textile industries out of market. On this week's episode of Our Voices, we'll discuss the influx of Chinese-made African prints and their impact on local textile industries. We will also hear directly from local designers and retailers on how to promote locally produced fabrics and transform Africa's textile industry to global success.
That's right. Well, businesses in the Ethiopian traditional clothing market say cheaper garments made by Chinese manufacturers is driving them out of work. Kennedy Abate has this report from the capital city of Addis Ababa, narrated by Vincent Makori.
This is Shiromeda Market in Ethiopia's capital city, Addis Ababa. Most shops here sell Ethiopian traditional clothes that are made of woven cotton. Business owners say they earned a decent income until Chinese companies started producing similar items made of chiffon. Meron Asrat is the owner of a traditional dress shop in Shiromeda. She says the competition is unfair.
There are no new buyers except for some of my own customers. The chiffons manufactured in China can't be a replacement for our traditional clothes, but people are moving toward the cheaper ones from an economic point of view.
Jamil Taha Abdul has a shop next door. He says Chinese manufactured clothes are hurting the market because of the price difference compared with clothes that are handmade locally.
It will be 3 or 4 times cheaper. We cannot compete with them. And people want to spend where there's a discount because life is a little difficult now.
Jamil said the clothes imported from China have created an uneven playing field in the market. But to stay in business, he says that he has started selling Chinese clothes as well.
We spent so much time without sleep on designing. Then in a week, the Chinese products flooded the market. That means you can't compete with them. So you become a prisoner against your will.
Endasha Shwobe, a customer, says price is what makes shoppers turn to Chinese clothes. Here, she bought a traditional Netala a handmade scarf-like clothing that is made of cotton.
The price of Chinese-made chiffon is better, but the quality of Ethiopian traditional clothes is better.
Birknesh Sugebo, another customer, shares Endeshesh's sentiments.
I came here to buy traditional clothes to send to other places, but it is very expensive. The Chinese counterfeit product is cheap and lower in terms of quality than what's woven by hand. But because of the cheaper price, people buy those counterfeit products.
Some business owners are asking the government to provide protection for traditional clothing weavers, garment makers, sellers, and other Ethiopians involved in the traditional clothing market. For Kennedy Abate, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, I'm Vincent Makori, VOA News.
Well, like the Ethiopian business owners, traditional textile makers and designers across the continent, they also say Chinese importers are not only undermining African domestic industries, but also compromising the traditional value. To discuss this further, we invited Jacqueline Shao, founder and director of Africa Fashion Guide. Ms. Shao is also a professional fashion designer, and she focuses on promoting African fashion and textile industry to the greater global market. Ms. Shao is joining us via Skype from London. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for the invite.
So let me start by asking, do they even tell the difference between Chinese-made and authentic dresses, and do they even care?
This is a difficult one because there's been a big influx of interest in, like what I'm wearing right now, it's called African print, Ankara, Kitenge, Kitenge. There's this interest in this type of print. But mostly the question is not asked, where is it from? And that's a question that organizations like Fashion Revolution, which launched in 2013, 2014, they started to get the customers to ask, where is it from? Who made my clothes? And that's the important thing. But most people will just look at it. It looks African, so it must be African. So that's where the assumption is. But what's happening is that from down to the textile, Chinese companies are replicating it so well. Before, these textiles used to be done in mostly polyester. So you could tell the difference. If it's 100% cotton, it was mostly the ones done by Velisco, or in Europe, or in Ghana, mostly the wax print houses. But now you're finding that the Chinese ones are doing 100% cotton, so you can't always tell the difference. Or it's 50 poly, 50 cotton. But the challenge is, even with the most traditional textiles, like the hand-woven textiles, the Chinese are replicating them. So your country cloth, for example.
Wow, that's really sad. But Ms. Shao, I want to ask you the question about the fact that some say that the issue is not really Chinese flooding the African market, but that Africans aren't able to produce enough for their own people and enough to export. So Chinese are coming in to fill that gap. What do you say about that?
It's definitely a supply chain issue. Going down to the raw materials, because most of the cotton, for example, is exported. The one that's grown in the continent, like about 95, 97% is exported. So the value chain is broken. If African companies have to import the textiles, import the inks, import the threads, import all the trims and notions that they need to produce their items, then that means the supply chain is broken. It's going to cost them more to sell it. And then if consumers can purchase it cheaper from outside sources, they're probably going to do that.
Hence, so 3 to 4 times the price. Right.
Right. So bringing up the cost. What do you think government measures should be taken in the country and outside of it to prevent Chinese import from flooding the market? Is it higher import taxation, maybe?
Absolutely. And I think it's something where governments have to support their own and recognize that their traditions are more important than the external business. But I know that it's a bit more complex than that. But one good thing is having the African Continental Free Trade Agreement or area, which will help the trade policies between countries. So I think a lot of us involved in this industry are looking more to see how that will positively impact the continent. But yeah, higher taxes or even banning it, including things like secondhand clothing, which I know the army in Rwanda was against as well, and things that have been flooding nations like all over the African continent. But those are also impacting local manufacturing.
Is there also anything that textile industries, local textile industries in the continent can do, maybe, to improve the time consumption? Because as Orion said earlier, these imports are not only filling the gap of the demand, there is influx, and but that's why they are pushing out the traditional textile producers. So is there anything that textile industries can do or they can be supported with?
Again, another tough one, because it's you need to mechanize the systems, and in order to quicken it, in order to produce for more numbers of people for the continent, which is like one of the fastest growing continents in the world. So yeah, that needs to be done. But then I think that having, higher production facilities, as well as slow fashion, artisan and craft facilities, can work together. But it's about having the systems in place to support that. So it's again a government thing, and it's about presenting that to the world and showcasing to people what Africa has to offer as a slow fashion opportunity, as an ethical fashion, sustainable fashion opportunity, as well as something that's supporting local producers.
Thank you, Michaud. Thank you for your work, and thank you for being here. We are going to stop right here. Jacqueline Shaw, founder and director of African Fashion Guide, thank you so much for joining us. It's time for a break, but we will continue our conversation on China's impact on Africa's textile industry. And when we come back, we will meet a researcher who specifically studied Nigeria's textile industry. We also love to hear from you on our social media platforms. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. And our handle is at VOA Africa. Use the hashtag VOA Our Voices. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
In times of change, when the world seems uncertain, and what we hear doesn't reflect what we see, we seek the truth. When we are told only part of the story, we lose trust. In moments of crisis, our dreams, hopes, and wishes for a better tomorrow depends on a free press. At Voice of America, we bring you the stories that people take risks to see. We connect the world and unite it with truth. At Voice of America, we show you the whole picture.
You're watching VOA's Red Carpet. My name is Jackson Vunganyi. Thank you so much for joining us each week right here on Red Carpet. We bring you the latest in
Welcome back. You are watching Our Voices. We are looking at Africa's traditional textile industry and the challenge it's facing from growing Chinese textile export into the continent. Joining us via Skype is Afolabi Toye, research assistant at University of North Texas, where he studies international political science in comparative studies. He has done extensive research for his master's thesis at Champaign University on China-Africa relations, entitled The Case of Northern Nigeria Textile Industry, which provided in-depth insight into China's in-game and local and international textile markets. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us, Toye.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So let's start with your study, with your findings, with the lessons learned from Nigeria. What are your recommendations for industries in Africa? What are they missing?
Yeah, I think looking at the textile industry in Nigeria, especially in the northern Nigeria, and what it used to be in the 60s compared to what it is now, I think it's kind of mind-boggling, especially looking at the number of jobs lost in that very sector due to all this competition from China. And I think what is more important is are the government really serious about textile industry, right? Mm-hmm. Are they really, because if you look at Nigeria, for instance, it's an oil-producing country, and most of its revenue comes from the oil. So are they really serious about the textile industry? Do they even believe that they can get much from that sector for them to pay attention to it? That becomes the problem. So because without the government involvement, this is kind of government, we practice a kind of system whereby that is centrally controlled. And without the government involvement ready to commit, it becomes so difficult for people to survive. And if the government policy is not helping the locals who are trying to survive in this sector, then the problem will persist. And the foreign investor now, in this case of China, they will continue to exploit the situation, whereby because there's no strong policy that prevents influx of material from outside, and there's no policy that protects the local industry. So it becomes so vulnerable, and then it becomes so difficult for them to survive. So what you are saying
is it's the negligence of African governments that is damaging textile industries, traditional clothing making in Africa.
Yes, in part, it contributed to it. I mean, that is the point, because the moment they shifted their attention away from other sector to oil sector, then the problem begins. Mm. The focus on oil has become everything for the government. That's where they get their revenue from. So paying attention to textile industry, I don't think is their priority for now. Mm-hmm. So not until they begin to realize that there's something in this sector, and they should work towards it, to revive it, not just to even for the revenue aspect of it, just to generate employment for the people. There are thousands of people who are not working, but with this sector, a lot of people can be engaged. So the government have to be serious about it. They have to be more meticulous and be ready to go into the sector. Without that, I think it's going to be difficult.
Mr. Toye, and what your point is making, it seems very desperate situation, because when I'm thinking about the manufacturers, when I'm thinking about the designers, they are really at the mercy of the government. But what can they do in terms of protecting their intellectual property when they design and when they make prints and all kinds of African very creative work? Do you think that protecting the intellectual property is possible? What can they do?
This depends on the agency in charge of the control now, because if the manufacturing agency who is in charge of monitoring the standard and the practice, they are not ready to do their job, then that becomes problematic. When you see people coming to learn your style, your systems and all that, and they're ready to go away with it to their country, started producing what you produce locally and coming to your market to sell. It has to depend on the agency.
Sue Chinese companies on the globe, on an international level, if they were to replicate their things? Is that easy?
Yeah, it's possible they can do it, but the agency, the manufacturing agency of Nigeria, for instance, has to be ready to do this, and they have to be willing to challenge the government in helping them to challenge all these foreign investors coming to steal their intellectual property and stuff like that. So if you don't see this seriousness, commitment from this agency and the government, then the whole thing becomes so difficult.
Yeah, so, talking about agency, what is the Nigeria textile manufacturers' experience with the U.S. AGOA law? Are they taking advantage of it? And is it efficient?
Yeah, well, for whether they are taking advantage of it, I'm not sure, because up to date, recently I was listening to one of the program on national TV in Nigeria, and they're still talking about this problem in this party. So I really don't know what those agencies here are really doing in terms of taking advantage of what is on ground and trying to help themselves build up this sector back again. So I really don't, even though whether they even have the full understanding of this thing, what does it does, I'm not sure of. So before you can take advantage of anything, you must know what this thing is all about, and you must know what it entails before you can take advantage of it. So all this knowledge needs to be, spread, be shared, you understand, and before they can take advantage of it. So it's so complicated for me, and the lack of attention is that's what I really worries about.
Wow. This is a very packed topic, and we have to continue to discuss it because we need to find solution for this textile industry and manufacturing industry in Africa. Well, we're going to have to stop it right here. We would like to thank you, Mr. Toye Ofolabi. He is a research assistant in the International Political Science in Comparative Politics at the University of North Texas. Thank you for sharing with us your insight on the textile industry on the continent.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Okay.
Well, before we close today's show, let's hear from some women in the capital city of Uganda, in Kampala, about their views on Chinese-made African clothing and what factors they consider the most when buying traditional clothing: price or quality. We have Charity Ahimbishwe, Martha Manutebi, and Blessings Anyeta in our Your Voice segment.
Clothes made in China are that it is wrong for China to make clothes for us, because we are Africans, should be able to make our own clothes. We should be able to be proud of ourselves with our little African clothes, because after all, those batiks, we produce them. We are proud to have bitenje.
I think, first of all, their making of African traditional wear is fake, because in the first place, I'm sure they do not have the original, they don't have the original feeling, the original material feeling of the African traditional wear that we have here in our African countries.
First of all, I think it's bad and good. Good in the sense that when you produce products that side, it's like cheaper, labor-wise, and all the costs go down. But at the same time, I feel like it's taking away jobs from people here.
In India and China and Asia, for them, having their stomach out is okay. But for us in Africa, having our stomach inside very well tucked in a good African wear is beautiful for us. So we espouse our culture best. Culture is best espoused by the people who believe in that culture.
It's actually not authentic, because why in the first place do they have to make African traditional wear yet they're not Africans?
There's a difference between you making something and you understand the significance of it or where it fits in the context, and you just making something as a product for commercial use.
If I found the Chinese one cheaper and done to my standard, surprise you, I would pay for the Chinese product and not the African one if it's going to be more expensive.
I would definitely not pay as much as I would pay for an African wear that comes from any African country as compared to that comes from China.
So I would rather pay more knowing the product has been made here and it's good quality than have it exported from somewhere else, and I don't really know if they've taken the time to understand what exactly they are making.
Wow, it's a very desperate situation for some of these local traditional industries, right?
It's like the choice is almost easy. It's people choose, money.
The price is right. They're going to go with the lower prices.
But that is, that compromises the quality, the feeling you get out of these dresses.
Okay, so tell us, when you're talking about quality, this is made where?
This is China made, just printed clothes.
I'm curious to know the one you're wearing.
This is handmade. You can tell. This is, the cotton is hand-picked, cleaned by hand, hand spun traditionally, and woven by hand.
Wow.
And that's woven. The weaving process takes a very long time. Each thread has to be spread and dyed, and the color patterns have to come together. And then finally, these designs, they are decorated by embroidery.
Wow.
And they have to sew each part, make the design, and then put it together.
Wow.
But this is made just in 1 week, but this can take days. But when you wear it, the feeling, it's not about the style or how the dress is, but it's also about the pride that comes with it, the love that comes with it.
Yeah, and I mean, I can imagine the different hands that touched it to try to bring it to life.
Exactly.
Because as we've heard it, the Ethiopian market is like they spend so much time designing.
Exactly, and the process to make this, it's passed from generation to generation. So it's part of the culture and the tradition. It can even tell the story of where you come from. Whoever comes from the north, the west, the east, the south, they all have their way, their color could be different, the style could be different. By the end of the day, you can see someone wearing a type of dress and say where they come from.
And then you have somebody else in the factory just slap it together in 2 days.
Exactly, and sell it for a 4 or 5 times
less,
cheaper price, and that can be painful for those people.
But you know what, you're right. I think there's a shininess to it that is different from the one you have on.
Yes, you see.
That one is really...
If I wear something like this, I feel like there's, like you said, a pride to it. And people, handmade, that means that they're putting their soul to it. So this, please offer something.
I mean,
like
I
this
think
to
I
me.
also have to say that we need to really begin to love our own made things, because, even though it could be a little bit pricey, I mean, sometimes we really need to empower those local, manufacturers, those local designers. So, because
it's also preserving our identity and preserving how, how we present ourselves to the global market.
One of the things I know governments are doing is cutting out those influx of used clothes from coming into the continent. A lot of manufacturers are saying that can help the situation. If you can start dumping all those things in Africa, maybe people won't have to, really go for those. We can wear our own.
By the way, when you talk about price, this will last for years. This one will be torn like maybe in a month.
So that's really
important. If you wear it 2-3 times, this will go away. So you have to buy another one.
See, people need to know that.
Yes, so you have to know that difference as well. Yeah. Well, this is where we end our show. Thank you so much for Toye Afolabi, research assistant at the University of North Texas, for joining us. We also thank Jacqueline Shaw, director of Africa Fashion Guide, who joined us earlier. We can watch our voices on VOA website at voaafrica.com or on YouTube channel, where you catch up on the latest episodes of the world's top news stories. We'll see you again next week with another exciting program. Be sure to continue the conversation on our social media platforms. Until then, thanks for tuning in. Good day.